welcome. Would you like to introduce your
Hello.
name, course, year, and university?
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Isabel Harding, but otherwise known as Izzy. I'm in year 2 of Bournemouth University studying marketing, and I live in Buckinghamshire, which is like just outside of London really, but yeah.
Could you tell us the course you're currently studying?
So I'm currently studying marketing. It's something that I've sort of always wanted to do. In terms of how I decided to do marketing, it's quite funny. It goes back quite far. I have 2 older sisters, and they're 7 and 6 years older than me, so quite a lot older. And the oldest one did marketing at university too. So I was in year 7 visiting my sister doing marketing, and as a young person, like you just look at that, and I don't know why, but I just decided from that moment on, right, I'm doing marketing. So my whole academic school career, I sort of went through and was like, yep, I'm going to university. Yep, I'm going to do marketing. And I decided that before I'd even studied business at GCSE. So sort of when going into business at GCSE, I sort of knew that was one thing I really needed to focus on. I really needed to try and understand, because that is what I was going to do when I was older. But yeah.
You said 2 years into your course.
Mm-hmm.
What have you thought of your course so far?
I've definitely thought it's been challenging. I think COVID does play a massive part. I understand that, the university says they've tried to make it as normal as possible. And, you'd think just going online doesn't make too much of a difference. But I think in comparison from first year to second year, there are a lot of changes. Such as like it's scheduling like a meeting with your teacher. If you need to ask a question, you need to send an email, or you need to schedule a meeting. And it just doesn't beat going there, like going at the end of your lecture up to your teacher and asking face-to-face a question, or even your friends. Like I found it was very beneficial to confidence to sort of know where other people in the course were up to with their work and how they were getting on. But now that we're not in university, it's definitely a lot harder to have that. But overall, I've really enjoyed it. I feel like the coursework has been really great in terms of what we've had to do. I feel like it's very beneficial to me as a marketer. Obviously, there are some subjects that are my weaknesses, and I'm sort of finding out exactly what I do wrong and how I can learn off that. So I suppose it is good that there are things that I'm not very good at, because now I am learning, right, that's what I need to work harder on. But I have really enjoyed it so far, to be fair.
Okay. So do you have a placement year on your course?
So I specifically did choose a placement year on my course. I know that it's so beneficial in terms of when you go to get a graduate scheme, and I really did want to learn. It was something that I knew that I wanted to do from the beginning. So yeah, I chose Bournemouth and I chose marketing so that I could have that year out to do the work.
Okay. Could you remind us of the university you're currently studying at?
Pardon?
Could you remind us of the university you're currently studying at?
Bournemouth University.
If we go into the best and worst things about studying at Bournemouth University, starting off with the worst.
So the worst thing about studying at Bournemouth University for me is that it is a off-campus university, technically. So it goes about sort of what I didn't know when I had to buy a house, well, rent a house this year. So obviously a lot of universities that I did look at, they were on campus. It was only a 5-minute walk from the accommodation to the actual university, whereas where in Bournemouth, if in first year you live in the first year accommodation, that's sort of a 30-minute drive. And in second year, they sort of say, get a house in Winton, that's very near, but they don't tell you specifically that, Winton, if you go to the right other side of Winton, it still is a 40-minute walk. So that probably for me is something that I would have been sort of wary of if I would have picked a university again, just because I feel like the walk is a very long walk. But for me, the best thing, I'm not sure if I'm meant to be talking about the course specifically, but I'm sort of going to say it as university as a whole, but the location that it's in, I feel like in terms of if you've got a day full of work and you've just been working all day, it's so great to just be able to go out on a lovely walk and go along the beach and just get some fresh air. Whereas I imagine if I was, say, somewhere like Birmingham, which is a city, I feel like it's harder to sort of clear your head and relax in that area after doing a day of university. So for me, especially with COVID, being in one section, like being in my room at my desk all day, I find it so useful. And I'm really happy that I've gone to an area where I can just take a stroll down the beach, sort of reevaluate the work that I've done that day. And yeah.
Okay. If we now go into your accommodation, where did you live in your first year?
So in my first year, I lived in Lyme Regis House, which was in the town centre. Yeah.
And what was it like living in Lyme Regis?
So one thing that I think everyone that I lived with that year can agree on is that it was definitely not as expected. In terms of what was advertised, it was sort of an older building and it was going to do like a £7 million refurb. And the pictures that they showed looked absolutely amazing. And I think really in terms of my feelings on it, I think I did just get the bad room out of a bunch of nice ones. Like I think we did get the worst sort of kitchen. But in terms of how it changed my experience, I think that it was a very unsociable building. We did try to sort of get friends with people on our floor, get friends with people above us, but people didn't really speak to each other and it wasn't very well mixed. But yeah, I do definitely think it was a lovely, I mean, I can't doubt it. Like I did really enjoy living in that room, and the room was nice. But yeah, in terms of the kitchen, it was just quite a small square kitchen. They didn't really have any like seating really. There was a 4-person table for a 5-person house. There was 2 sofas that weren't really sofas, they were just chairs, but you'd go to other people's houses and you know there'd be a nice sitting area where you could all sit together, and it was because of that it was very isolated. I think, you know, people sort of came and went from the kitchen. You didn't really spend much time together.
And if we had to put Lyme Regis on a scale of party to study, where would you say Lyme Regis would be?
So I would say if party was 10 and study was 1, I'd say it is probably about like a 4, maybe going on to 5. It wasn't a very busy accommodation. There wasn't really a lot going on. So I had more time to study, but I view university as just studying. Like I think some people choose to go to university because they don't really know what they want to do or they want the experience, but for me it was definitely I just want to get my degree. So I did sort of go into university saying, look, do not even try and think about the partying, go where you can, but ultimately focus on your workload.
Okay, if we now go into your second year, where are you living now?
So I'm living in Winton, but there is some sort of, I think the university could be a bit more supportive in the sense of helping you understand where you're going. I didn't know what area Winton was in. I didn't know what area Charm Minister was in. I had no clue where I was moving. So you sort of say, oh, look, I'm here to try and find a house, and the estate agents take you around, but you actually have no clue where you are and you have no clue how far you are from essential things. And so for us and our house, we've ended up nearer to Charm Minister than we have to Winton. So where a lot of our friends, it's only a 15-minute walk to university, for us it's actually like a 30 to 40-minute walk. And even like when we go to our friend's house, say it's dark and I'm walking to my friends, where it should be about 3 minutes, actually, because we're the other side of Winton, it's actually like 20. So it is a bit more dangerous. And I would definitely be mindful of that when buying a house again. And I wish that I knew that when buying, well, not buying, but renting a house.
That's all right. If we're now going to the Bournemouth area, could you tell us about the Bournemouth nightlife?
So I think the Bournemouth nightlife is better than I had expected. I didn't do too much research around sort of the nightlife or anything like that. It was more sort of about the university. But again, like I sort of mentioned, I didn't go to university to party, so I don't go out too much. I'm not part of any socials, which I think, you know, the majority of the week is made up by going to these socials. But, you know, where I have been, I did really like, in first year, I lived opposite one of the main clubs, which was the old fire station. And that did sort of become my favourite, and that I would go there every week. But yeah, I sort of tried to mix it. And with COVID happening and things, it did definitely get cut short. But Bournemouth as an area, it's a very strange one. Like sometimes I think, oh God, I'm in quite a dangerous area, because I think in terms of the people in the area itself, when you sort of leave a club, there is a lot of homeless people around, and a lot of them do ambush you, and it literally seems like one after the other on a night, on a walk home. And, you know, I just hate to think if you were a really, really drunk girl, or if you were really vulnerable, I would hate to think sort of what situations you'd get into with those people around. Like, they might not be dangerous at all, but it still is something scary to think about.
If we're not going to the shops, you know, your essentials, your everyday shopping, aside from obviously Lyme Regis, which is more central, which would be around the Asda, as previously mentioned. Now you're in Charminster. What are the shops like around you? Are they traditional or they're more chain?
I would say there's the odd chain, but ultimately the whole of a lot of Charminus and a lot of Winton is actually independent companies. There are your basic, there's a mini Waitrose, there's like a KFC, but there are a lot of different independent companies that this year I've really been excited to go to when shops do reopen. I do think the one downside is that there's no sort of big shop. There's an Aldi, which is really good, but it's quite a small Aldi. So a lot of time, even in second year, I would find myself going all the way to Asda, just so because I know that there'll be a bigger shop there and I can get all the stuff I definitely need. Whereas the odd time I go to Aldi, I come home and I realise I'm missing a couple of things off the list.
If we now go into the restaurants and the food shops, again, is it more chain or is it more traditional?
I sort of a similar answer to the previous question is that there are a lot of independent shops. There are, again, like I said, there are the usual chain shops that you'd find, Pizza Hut, KFC, but more than my home area, there is actually more independent shops, and I do get drawn to those naturally a bit more because they're a bit quirky and a bit independent. Obviously this year, like I said, the shops haven't been open for a lot of the time, so I've not been able to experience it how I would have hoped. But yeah, from what I've seen, there are a lot of nice independent shops and cafes and restaurants.
Can you tell us what it was like being a department rep, what it entailed and how you kind of got the job?
So I became a department rep after I'd become a student rep, and I feel like a department rep role is just a bit more in depth than it is a student rep. And so in sixth form, I was a part of a lot of extracurricular activities. I feel like I did sort of spread myself a bit thin with that. I was doing so much stuff. And so when I came to university, I just sort of said, look, like, don't do as much as you were doing before because you do wear yourself a bit thin across everything. So it took me a while to become student rep until I decided that I was comfortable with understanding what sort of work I was doing. And so when did I become a student rep? I'm not sure if it was at the beginning of this year or if it was the end of last year. And I wasn't given the opportunity to become department rep until Christmas time. So we've only sort of had 2 meetings since I've become department rep. I think it's very interesting as a student's point of view because you are in a meeting with a lot of important individuals to the university, a lot of very high up business individuals, and it's nice to get an insight into sort of what is going on behind the scenes and how you can affect sort of the courses and what's going on. But like I said, it's just another step up from a student rep. So in terms of my job as a student rep, it's just a bit more than that.
Could you describe briefly what a student rep is?
So a student rep there's sort of 3. So for marketing, there's 3, and you sort of every term you'd go to the students and you'd ask what they think about their courses, how they're finding it, and sort of get their feedback on it. And then you display that and you'll display it to the people that are the head of course and head of year, and you talk about it. And then once again in the term, you'd have a massive meeting where there are certain policies that the university bring into place, and they then ask you to decide, well, there's a massive vote, but they ask you to decide on if you want to get rid of the old policies in replace of the new ones, or if you want to keep the old policies. And some of them are really important, and some of them are things that I wouldn't personally even think about. Like one that I didn't even think was a policy and I didn't know was a policy was about sex working in universities and how to support people who are taking part in sex work. And that's something that didn't even cross my mind that, people would need support of, but I felt like it was really important to keep that in place because, as everyone knows, like when you're a student, that's when you're the most low on income. That's when you're the most, you need the money the most. So I feel like in terms of students, that's really important to have in place. And yeah, things like that, like I think as just a normal student, you don't realise you're going on in the background and you don't realise that support is out there. It's very interesting.
What general advice would you give to students about the study at university?
The general advice I'd give is just to really research your course and just to sort of understand what you're going into. As a marketer, I did look into business management. I looked into just business as degrees at Bournemouth University. And, I look at it now and I think I'm so glad that I definitely went for marketing, because when I did look at the modules, I did realise that in business, there are more modules that I thought I would struggle with than there are in marketing. So I think like we sort of spoke about earlier about A-levels, you think in your head to choose the hardest A-levels because then that will look the best and that will be the greatest, but then actually by doing that you actually then struggle and maybe don't progress as much as you'd like. It's very much like that with university. I feel like choose what you know you're good at, because then it will become easier to you.
What advice would you give to students about to study at Bournemouth University?
So student advice I'd give to people at Bournemouth University would be to just come and make the most of the experience. I think my advice is very changed by COVID. I think, you know, as a whole, our whole university experience has been very, very different. So, but something I really wish I would have made most of in first year was just making the most of the whole experience. Like, I feel like first year flies by, and I really think that students should sort of just enjoy being in first year, because I think what people don't realise is that first year there really is a big change from the work that you do in first year to second year. Like, you do need to step up massively, and so I think, you know, it's very important to enjoy the time that you have in first year before you then have to really knuckle down in second.
And what advice would you give to students about to study your course at university?
My course. So I think the advice that I would give to students at my course is to really, really, really focus on referencing. Something that I sort of didn't really know is that your work could be amazing and you could hit all the other boxes, but if you've not quite got that referencing right, then, you know, you go down the pegs really quickly. And like I said, that's something that I personally didn't know until I actually went there. And again, I had to get a few grades that I weren't quite happy with to know that that's what I had to do. So it's something that I don't think really gets taught to you in A levels. And I think it's something that you don't really, you know that you've got to reference, but you don't understand how important referencing is to your grade. Like, it's not, oh yeah, if you do it wrong, you just get a couple of marks off. No, you drop down a lot. So definitely focus on referencing, because it's a massive part of every single thing you do.
You chose going to university over an apprenticeship / going right into work. What path you to make this choice?
So I was really considering near the end of my sixth form experience to do a degree apprenticeship. Like I sort of spoke on earlier, my whole life I've sort of seen both my sisters go to university, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. But, you know, as you get older, you do see more things. And so when I did come to university, I knew that I definitely wanted a degree, but I just thought that I might want to do an apprenticeship on the side, because I did want to get into work. Like, I was working sort of full / part-time whilst doing my A levels, and I was enjoying that. So I did try and apply for a couple of degree apprenticeships. Now, I think dependent on what your course is and what you want to do, depends on how many there are. For marketing in my personal area, there weren't as many as I would have hoped. And so when deciding between university and that, I sort of applied to a couple and got to the final stages, but when it didn't quite go through, I just thought, okay, well, I still definitely want my degree, so I still definitely will go to university. But I definitely do think times are changing in education. In terms of marketing, I don't think there was really any apprenticeships, any degree apprenticeships sort of maybe 5 years ago, but now it's such a big thing. And I think I come from a very biased family. My whole family went to, like, both my sisters went to university. And so they were both saying to me, look, you really should go. But then also the school that you go to, you know, our school did mention degree apprenticeships, but they were ultimately pushing people to go to university. But I would have loved to have got my degree and done a degree apprenticeship at the same time, even though it would be a bit harder. But, you know, that would have been good, but I didn't get there.
At this point, I let students have what I like to call a free-for-all. You can say what you like about what you want. You can give advice, you can say something smart, you can say something dumb. Literally, the floor is yours.
Oh God, the pressure. So my advice to students would be to talk to as many people, one in the year above you, about what you're going into. I feel like in terms of university, like after first year, I thought, okay, well, I know everything that I need to know about university. But then going into second year, there were so many things that I actually didn't really know about. So I feel like it is really important to talk to the people above you in years to sort of gauge what they were struggling with. And what else would my advice be? Oh, that's hard. Oh, so again, it would be to definitely join a society. And I was told this advice so many times, so I don't know why I didn't even follow all the advice that was given to me. But when I first started university, I felt like I was so busy. Like, I felt like I was either being sociable or doing work. There was sort of no in between. And at the time, I thought, oh no, I just don't have any time. I don't have any time to do a club sort of 3 times a week. But even if you just join for the first month and then go off and do your work, it is so important for making friends. And it is it is the main thing. And I was told this so many times and I just didn't listen to anyone, but I wish I would have, because it is so important when joining university to make friends like that. And you don't even need to stay on it for the whole year, but just for that experience. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and I am plugged in.
Amazing. Thank you.